Happy October, everybody. This time on CinemAttack, we have our usual segments, which are always fun and always great. But there's actually something special about this episode. For the first time in 5 whole months, all 3 of us are covering the same film. The intense science fiction movie, which is currently #1 at box office and has a 96 on Metacritic, Gravity. Which I'm sure I disagree with Max on, as always.
Nope, not this time, Sean.
You're kidding.
Surprisingly, no. We're on the same page, Sean. Imagine that.
So, does that mean that we all agree? Completely? Larry, do you?
Yeah, I agree. This is, a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, just do the opening, Sean.
I don't respond well to positivity.
So where's home, Dr. Stone?
Lake Zurich, Illinois.
Is there somebody down there looking up, thinking about you?
I had a daughter. A little girl with brown hair. Tell her that I'm not quitting.
It's an average day around Earth's orbit, and Dr. Ryan Stone is on her first expedition into the final frontier.
Accompanied by Matt Kowalski, a veteran astronaut, the mission is going smoothly until the pair and the rest of the crew aboard the Space Shuttle Explorer is attacked by some dangerous debris.
Knocked off the shuttle and stranded in space, Kowalski and Stone must find a way to get back home before they either lose all of their oxygen amounts or the debris returns around its orbit and comes hurling back.
Gravity's story is incredibly simple. There are only 2 real characters, and it all takes place pretty much in real time. This simplicity lets it focus on its choice elements really well, which is something that you don't see much from movies of this budget. This small scale of the story is also a nice contrast to the massive scale of the setting.
Gravity is all about isolation and what it truly feels like to be alone. But it's also about the human spirit and its power even in our darkest hours. Sounds cheesy, I know, but the film is never blatant about what it's trying to convey.
Gravity really nails its sense of vulnerability. These characters are so small, so feeble compared to these structures, Earth, and just the void of space. They are nothing. They are completely at the mercy of the elements and just pure luck, and that's why this movie is so consistently intense.
Within the vacuum of space, it seems all too unreal to see such a devastating scenario hit such a fractured and flawed human being like Dr. Stone.
Gravity is a visual marvel. I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say that this movie probably comes the closest to making me feel like I'm really in space.
Gravity is easily one of the most technically impressive films I've ever seen. It takes place in space, obviously, so all rules about blocking or just how your characters can move through the physical space of your narrative, it's totally out the window. Alfonso Cuarón passed this challenge with flying colors, truly capturing the essence of space, and the freedom that this gives the movie in terms of cinematography is perfectly utilized.
And speaking of what the movie shows you, I must say that the first thing that really grabbed me about Gravity is its incredible cinematography. There were some genuine moments where my jaw was hanging wide open, just in awe of the interstellar beauty on display. Combined with the amazing soundtrack, the cinematography can produce some moments of sheer magnificence.
I can tell Cuarón took time to envision every single scene in his head, because every single shot in this film is intricately designed and is simply very well done. It's quite astounding, if you ask me.
Their predicament is so believable thanks to the insane attention to detail and the great sense of realism that the film has. Every moment, it feels like they're on the verge of death, which is true. I mean, I haven't seen a movie sell its character's peril so well in a really long time.
I also like how the movie never feels the need to throw as many camera angles as it can at you. Well, okay, at least in the beginning. The first half hour of this 90-minute film is composed of what? 3 or 4 shots?
Cuarón lets the camera take its time, and we get plenty of long, sweeping shots at Earth, and it's just beautiful.
It takes its time and all the while hooks you right in. That is some intelligent filmmaking.
Gravity also has 2 very good leads, with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney playing 2 very likable, relatable characters.
George Clooney is the great father figure Kowalski, and it really goes to show that he gets what it means to be a good actor. But in all fairness, he pales in comparison to the career best performance that Sandra Bullock showcases. Hers is so human and so incredibly deep that I believed everything. I felt her fear, I felt her loss of hope, and I felt that happiness that materialized just once or twice throughout the whole film. I really can't say that for any other performance I've seen this year.
The sound design is also incredible. Of course, the only sound while out in space is in the helmet, the voices, the radio, breathing, stuff like that, and then the few sound waves that can somehow travel through the suit. And it all sounds just so great. Whoever did audio design on this movie really deserves an Oscar.
And this delicious outer space ice cream sundae would not be complete without some serious suspense. If you were to ask me for a 3-word summary of Gravity, I'd say it's Hitchcock in space, and that's no exaggeration.
The lack of audio also allows for some heart-stopping, completely silent moments where you are utterly absorbed by the visual. One of these shots in particular is pretty much the most phenomenal shot of the year in terms of just pure visual splendor.
It gets what makes suspenseful thrillers so engaging and never lets up until the last minute. But I find my one substantial issue with this movie in that same regard.
You see, Gravity just builds up its thrills a lot, but sadly, it never really pays off. Let me elaborate. When the film is quiet and it's waiting for the thrills to come, you are invested like that. Your heart is pounding, you're sitting there, you're at the edge of your seat, you're waiting for something to just happen already. But when the big boom actually happens, it lasts for maybe a millisecond, and the shock kind of wears off pretty quickly.
As well-paced as it may be, Gravity has a bad habit of constantly throwing as many set pieces as it can at Kowalski and Stone, to the point where it becomes more than a little predictable. I know that the filmmakers want to give a suspenseful experience, but I think that suspense is defined by where it isn't just as much as it's defined by where it is. I mean, if a film is suspenseful all the time, is it really suspenseful at all?
Yes, there are some moments of shock and awe, but for the most part, when the big boom comes, it's just not nearly as effective as the anticipation.
My point is, by the third act, I was seeing a pattern. Character goes to place, bad thing happens in place, character must leave and go to another place.
I find that the best thrillers are the ones that keep me really freaked out during the build-up, and even more freaked out during the big impact. And sadly, Gravity just doesn't do this. Sadly though, Gravity does go through a bit of turbulence, and its hiccups mainly come into some various aspects of the film, which all come off as very mixed bags. The script at times can be profoundly written and very believable, yet at other times it can be pretty obvious and just plain stupid. At times, the plot moves very smoothly, and it has sparks of creativity in its elements. But you just gotta feel like the movie doesn't really take that many risks, and honestly, the plot ends up becoming a bit generic and predictable by the end of it. The movie does keep you investing with the pacing, as there are very interesting moments put in between all of the somber moments, but yet, by the end of the film, it feels rather short, even with an hour-and-a-half running time. But I hate to say that because there are some thrills that are truly, truly investing. But sadly, most of them are just pretty weak.
My only serious problem with Gravity is that its emotional story doesn't seem to really kick in until the third act. We have some good lines with good scenes previously in the film, but it doesn't crop up until near the end. And this third act stuff is really good too, and so when it hit, I just thought to myself, okay, that was great. Why didn't we get some of that sooner? Since a movie's job is to be emotionally engaging, I mean, especially a thriller like this is kind of a big deal.
Something else that puzzled me was the 3D on display. In an interview, director Alfonso Cuarón once said that Gravity in 2D is only 30% of the experience. To that I ask, really? I mean, the 3D isn't bad, but it's nothing to write home about.
Outside of a few, object is close to the camera, besides a few of that, it actually is used really, really effectively to create a great sense of, no pun intended, space.
I'd say it's very subtle, to the point where I barely noticed it at all. But is that really a good thing? I paid extra money to see Gravity in 3D, and I expected the 3D to grab my attention, but it never did. Midway through the film, I even forgot I was wearing 3D glasses because it looked so flat. It's not badly executed 3D, it's just underwhelming, at least in my opinion.
In the end, Gravity impressed me more than it engaged me, but sometimes that's okay. It's pretty much what I'd hoped it would be, a great experience film. A movie whose atmosphere and filmmaking alone totally absorbs you. That's definitely something I've been craving for a long time.
I was really hoping Gravity was going to be a new experience for me at the theater, and I was really looking forward to seeing Cuarón take on such a really interesting concept, because I've heard so much about this director, and this is the first film I've seen from him, besides the Harry Potter third movie, so I was really interested to see what he could do. But I feel Gravity just makes some stumbles and falls, and eventually it just succumbs to being a normal, average thriller. Again, that's not to say it's bad. In fact, the movie does excel at many moments. You can tell the movie is well crafted, and it's painstakingly clear that Cuarón and his whole crew had a ton of time and effort put into this film. In fact, the visuals alone are totally worth the price of admission, especially in 3D.
So, I loved Gravity. It's beautifully acted, beautifully shot, beautifully paced, and beautifully told. It almost seems to know how good of a film it is, to the point where it pours heavy on what works really well, and ironically, it does come off as a bit much at times. Even so, it's one of the best movies of the year, and an absolute shoo-in for any year-end top 10 list around the web.
I do recommend you go see Gravity. It's definitely a work of art. It's just not a masterpiece. Gravity gets a B.
Gravity gets an 8.5 out of 10.
Gravity gets a 5 out of 5.
Hugh Janus? Really? Hugh Janus?
Well, the great death of the parody genre continues.
I know you're expecting me to facepalm, but that's just not enough.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another edition of this CinemAttack Newsreel. Well, okay, before we discuss this in a bit more detail, let's discuss the man in question, Mr. Tom Hanks. an actor, producer, and part-time writer-director who has truly left his mark on film history. Whether it's a hard-hitting drama like The Green Mile or an animated feel-good movie like Toy Story, you've probably seen Tom Hanks somewhere and somehow, and for good reason. He's a very talented man. Hanks has been in the headlines recently promoting his new film Captain Phillips, but he's been making them not for the reason you think. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. Hanks revealed this past Monday during an appearance on Late Night with David Letterman that he has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. For those unaware, type 2 diabetes is an illness in which a person's sugar metabolism is severely weakened due to insulin resistance, leading to an overabundance of sugar in the blood not getting to body cells, which can lead to a severe lack of energy. So it seems pretty straightforward so far, yes? Tom Hanks has diabetes. So why is this story so perplexing? Well, it turns out that he's been battling high blood sugar for over 20 years, ever since the age of 36. But not only that, Hanks seems to be completely fine with this diagnosis, as he's taking this news in a bit of a joking manner, saying that, quote, type 2 diabetes is controllable. You've just got to lose weight and exercise a lot and change everything you eat and never, ever, ever, ever have any fun whatsoever. He was also quoted saying, sometimes I'm in pretty good shape, other times I'm not. Hey, you gotta live, you know? It turns out I do want to live, and it means I have to stay skinnier. This story comes off very odd to us here at the CinemAttack Newsreel. On the one hand, type 2 diabetes is a very common yet serious disorder, and it's important to recognize its possible severity, as well as how much it can change a person's life forever. Yet at the same time, Mr. Hanks seems to be letting it roll off his back. Yes, he understands that it is something to take account for, but at the same time, as you watch his appearance, he's cracking jokes about it left and right, and is acting as if his life hasn't changed much. Nevertheless, we here at the CinemAttack Newsreel wish Mr. Hanks luck in his quest to battle it out, and we still look forward for his work in the future. We hope this doesn't stop him, as it doesn't look like it. Thanks for watching, and this has been the CinemAttack Newsreel.
Hello, fair audience, and welcome once again to Recommendation Domination. If you recall, we mixed up the format a bit. Now we're just doing 2 movies from the past and 2 upcoming releases that I see potential in. This week was a tough one for me because Gravity is such a unique film, but I still think I managed to link it to some really good movies, and I'm excited to share them with you. So here we go. So Gravity is a film about survival and willpower, and it focuses mostly on a single character. With those things in mind, I gotta draw the obvious comparison and recommend 127 Hours. From the director of Slumdog Millionaire, which you should also totally see, 127 Hours follows the true story of Aaron Ralston, a climber whose arm becomes trapped under a boulder out in the middle of nowhere. How long is he stuck? I forget. James Franco, who I do consider to be pretty underrated as an actor, completely carries this film, giving us easily his best performance to date. Since he's the only major character, we get a great look at who he is, and we get to see how he handles this situation, and most importantly, how he changes because of it. In all honesty though, I think I respect this movie more than I like it, and that's another way in which it's like Gravity. Just the fact that a movie with a single character in a single location was able to hold my interest the entire way through is actually quite bewildering, and even if you ended up not liking the movie as a whole, you have to admit it's still a commendable experiment. Also, Scooby-Doo has never been scarier. If you've seen the movie, you know. So what is Gravity's theme? What's its main character's emotional arc? Well, it's about a person who is overcoming a personal tragedy, who's kind of numbed because of it, but they rediscover their passion and drive for life through some pretty extreme circumstances. This is actually very similar to the main character's arc in, oddly enough, Up. Seeing as it's one of my top 5 favorite films of all time, it's going to be hard for me to properly explain why I love Up so much in this short amount of time, but let's see if I can do it. In 1 minute or less. Ready? Go. The animation is spectacular and really colorful. I especially like the art style. It's just the right amount of realism while still remaining cartoonish. The opening is some of the best storytelling ever put to film. It shows you the entire relationship of Carl and Ellie, most of it without a single line of dialogue, and it alone is more emotionally engaging than most feature films. From there, it's an incredibly fun and imaginative adventure. The script has lots of humor, but also knows when to be serious. It's one of the few children's films that is absolutely perfect in that balance. This drama, by the way, is the most mature and touching of any Pixar film, hands down. It deals with some pretty heavy issues and does so masterfully. And finally, Doug is a delightful character, one of my all-time favorites actually, flawlessly capturing the essence of a cliché dog. On that note, we all know Gravity needed a talking dog. Up is simply wonderful. It's the best animated film ever made in my opinion, and absolutely everybody needs to see it. Up gets a 10 out of 10. Why am I giving scores? As for upcoming releases, what do I even have to say about Anchorman 2 at this point? Hopefully not a lot, because I don't have much. The first Anchorman is an utterly complete comedy. It's bizarre, incredibly funny, and filled to the brim with referenceable lines, spot-on performances, and memorable scenes. More of that, please. That's all I got. What? Like there's tons to analyze about Anchorman?
Rick, where'd you get a hand grenade? I don't know.
It seems that every time I do this segment, I have one recommendation that I make based off just a first impression of a trailer. In that tradition, I guess, I'm personally very intrigued by 47 Ronin. Based on a famous Japanese legend, 47 Ronin, starring apparently nicest guy ever Keanu Reeves, is about a band of samurai that set out on an epic journey to avenge their master. How many samurai? I forget. First of all, I think we need more fantasy films. I mean, Middle-earth can only give us so much. And secondly, it's been a long time since we've had a good samurai movie. And even though I like Keanu Reeves and I'm a huge sucker for anything samurai, I mean, this is my letter opener, I wasn't interested in 47 Ronin until this trailer. And while the trailer, yeah, it can be a little cliche at times, it really does give me hope. The visuals look simply breathtaking, the setting's very unique for us Western audiences, and it's not that hard to pull off a solid revenge story. So here's hoping that 47 Ronin could be the next great samurai action epic, one that makes audiences everywhere go, whoa. And thus Sean wept, for there were no more films left to recommend. Hopefully you decide to check out all my picks and enjoy them, and if you don't, please send all complaints to maxmariner@gmail.com. And remember, the greatest movies you've ever seen, you may not have seen just yet. And lo, we reach the end of CinemAttack episode 14. As always, thanks for watching, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that you should probably go out and see Gravity sometime soon. If just to celebrate how positive this episode was. Because there's no way that's going to happen again. So until next time, I'm Sean Capdeville.
I'm Larry Freed.
And I'm Max Mariner.
See how quickly they forget the wounds dealt. Well, I do not forget. And I do not forgive.